Hello and welcome back to the channel. I am Jeremy Brendle, and it has been far too long since I was able to put out content. I have to admit, never in a million years would I have thought that I was excited to, put content back out on YouTube, but yes, I really am. It feels really good to be back, getting back to Project Rising Sun. Little blip on the radar, had some downtime, and but now we're getting back to it, and we're going to pick up where we left off last time, which is round rod. And we're going to start with the back end. I'm actually going to do the how-to video on this one. But first, I just kind of wanted to explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. There's a little bit of kind of like multiple points with this one because, making things symmetrical is what everybody asks me about the most. And when I say, making things symmetrical, we have to keep in, mind, we're talking within like a 16th or 32nd of an inch. Nothing is perfect. Nothing even from the OEM is perfect. So, from side to side, you kind of have to do your best and, decide when and where to split hairs. So when we're talking about these panels in particular, now, this is the front side of the rear wheel well and the section that goes underneath the door. Now, everything behind me is already done. And, getting back to symmetry, doing something on one side is easy because, when I'm doing it, I put things where I want it to be based on like a measurement, or visually I like it somewhere, or whatever the case may be, I decide where I want it on one side. Then I'm able to transfer that to the other side based on measurements. So with this panel, this is the one I'm going to do the how-to video on, and I'm just going to explain this real quick. The first reason really is, these panels, you can see, have a lot of flexibility, in them right now. And this flexibility allows for side-to-side movement. So from side to side of the car, I could be out anywhere from, a 16th of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch, just depending on how this is, sitting right now. So by adding these rods, I can, number one, add stability so that, I don't have this sponginess in here anymore. And number two, if I have to, push something out or pull something into place, based on my measurements, I can do that by cutting my rod and putting them in where I want them. So the other thing that I'm doing with this is creating a sealed cavity. There are parking sensors, and I do not want them to be exposed to the elements. So, almost lost it. I will be adding round rod, basically right in here, and then another one up in this section here, and that will close off this port. I will be adding another one at the very top here, and all these sections then that I'm, closing off, I will put foam in to create, a solid cavity in here that doesn't allow the elements to get into. I'll have to make a trim panel. But then this port will actually be separate. So those are the main reasons why I'm doing the round rod this particular way. You could do this, really you could do this in a bunch of different ways, but I'm just keeping in, with the materials that I'm already using. And I've had a lot of people ask me about fiberglass and metal. And, realistically, fiberglass in itself will stick to metal for a time, but honestly, it is a time bomb. So, people are asking me, well, how can you use metal and fiberglass together? And, to answer the question is, this is kind of like thinking about it more like rebar and concrete. The fiberglass in itself will hold this stuff inside. So I'm adding this strength that will then be covered in fiberglass. And there's more tricks to it that I will get into down the road. But that is, kind of something that's been really asked a lot lately. And that is, will it stick? And the long and short answer is yes and no. I will make it stick, but you have to think of it in different terms. I'm not putting fiberglass on something and making sure that the fiberglass sticks just to the metal. The metal will be encased within the fiberglass, just like rebar and concrete. So that's kind of just an explanation of where this is going. So once everything is actually encased in this section here, like I said, this will be able to be closed off to the elements. So I got a little video of what the inside of the rear wheel well will look like, and I'll play that for you now. And after that, we will get into actually installing the round rod. Now it's going to be nice because I'm not doing anything with vapors or anything like that, so I can actually stay mic'd up. And I'm kind of going to do like, same format, the point of view, and just explaining what I'm doing as I go along. So yeah, let's check out the wheel well, and then after that, we'll jump into the how-to videos. All right, so like I said, we are going to be using this panel for this how-to video on this episode. There's some already marks that I have made for reference points, and I just did that to get base measurements. So now that I've done all that, I'm going to do the step-by-step. And the first thing we're going to do is prep this panel and get it ready for epoxy. So, you can use pretty much whatever you want, sandpaper, a rasp, file, whatever you want. I actually like saw blades. These little saw blades, they're nice because they bend, they contour really well. They don't really go dull very quick. You can use them in both directions. So it makes getting fiberglass, matte like this, leveled out pretty quick, a really easy task. So again, I have these reference points here. I'm not really worried about them. I already know what they are. So we'll just put them back on when we need to. But we're just going to start by prepping the panel here. So that corner is pretty much done. Like I said, it's just a little tool that I like to use. You can use whatever you want. This area right here, there was a little bit of a spot on there from some resin that kind of dripped. So I already kind of messed with it a little bit, but so we're doing 3 rods here. The last section is going to be up in here. I'll do my best to get this on camera, but probably going to get in the way. All right, so that's pretty much it. That's all we're going to do here for scuffing. Again, I like this saw blade. It puts a nice little groove into the fiberglass, gives some good, bite for the resin to grab onto. So next step is going to be wiping everything down. I don't need to record that, but this is, definitely a step you want to do. Use acetone, rubbing alcohol, whatever you prefer. I'm going to use acetone, make sure I get everything off. After that, we will lay out some measurements. So when we come back, we'll do that. All right, so the next step is going to be laying out these measurements. Now, I have them from the other side of the car, like I said, and I already know what they are, so we're just going to walk through them, one by one, and I'll explain them as I go. We're going to start here at the bottom, and I'm going to come up from this bottom edge 1/4 of an inch. That is going to be where the bottom of the round rod is going to sit. Now, the next measurement is going to be from this edge in. And I'm going to be coming in 1/8 of an inch all the way up. Reason being, this area in here is going to get a trim panel. And I want that trim panel to be inset 1/16 of an inch. So the material itself is also 1/16. So I'm giving myself 1/8 inch total to account for everything so that that trim panel lands exactly where I want it to. So we're going to measure out 1/8 inch here, and then we're also going to measure out 1/8 inch right about here. Now, there was a reference point that I had previously. You can see I actually made that point here on the back just so that when I did all the scuffing, I could then transfer it back to the other side. So, little trick, think a step ahead with these points. If you can mark it on the opposite side, knowing it's going to go away, make that mark, save yourself a little hassle down the road. So that's basically going to be roughly the center of the rod. And that's roughly my 1/8 inch mark. Now it doesn't have to be perfect, we're just wanting 1/8 inch from this edge to here. So, again, from side to side, if you're within a 32nd of an inch, nobody's going to notice. The last mark we're going to do is up in here. I'll try my best to get it. Now, same with the top edge. I want to come in 1/8 of an inch down, and this edge 1/8 of an inch in. And that will be our intersecting point up in this top corner. Oops, forgot to put that one down here at the bottom. There we go. So these are an intersecting point here, and I want that round rod basically to sit right there in that little corner. All right. So that's all our intersecting points. That's all our marks. On the inside, I already have stuff marked out. Same with right here at the bottom. So these are all the points where this round rod is basically going to intersect on these panels. You know, when we're talking symmetry, again, taking these measurements from side to side, making sure that, you know, the distance from here to this corner is the same on both sides. You know, by measuring these rods and setting them into place in the same points, you know, I'm making sure from side to side that all these variables and measurements are accounted for. And this is just basically how I do it to make sure that from side to side I'm staying as symmetrical as possible. So the next step is going to be cut all our round rod and deburr it. So we'll get to that next. Okay, so the next step is going to be cutting the round rod. We're going to be doing 3 pieces, like I said. I have all the measurements from the other side of the car already marked down. So all we are going to do is measure them. We're going to cut them. I'm actually going to cut them a little long so that I can take them over to my belt sander and sand them down to actual length. So, you know, first step, like I said, we're just going to make our marks and then we'll get everything cut. So the first one that we're going to be doing is 1 7/8. So I'm just going to make my mark. I like to mark a couple different spots. Just helps me when I'm cutting. That's our first one. Our next one is going to be 3 1/16. So we're just going to set our square. This is a point where, you know, one side of the car, you know, when you do something the first time, measurements really don't matter because, you know, it's where you want it, how it looks, or whatever the case may be. You've decided this is where you want it to be. When you're transferring everything to the other side, you know, I can't stress enough, this is where you want to be really, really accurate in your measurements. So, you know, these little spare rods I have sitting around, they're just scraps. And, you know, a little tip, it's, you know, when you get a piece like this and you want to keep it, just take it over to your sander and deburr aside, you know, so you have it ready to go. So you're not, you know, wasting time down the road. You know, just little things that I've found over time make my life a lot easier. Second one. Last one is going to be 3 5/16. All right. Got these all marked, so now we're just going to cut them. to sand these things to length, and you can see here, you know, I cut it a little bit long, and the idea was so that I can sand this thing down to length. And, you know, trying to cut it really accurate with a cutoff wheel, it's really hard. Now, if you have like a bandsaw, which I have a bandsaw, I could have used that. It's just not really up and running right at the moment. I just didn't feel like taking the time to get it up, especially when I'm only doing a couple cuts. So, you know, if you're doing this at home, this is how you can do it. Now we're just going to sand this thing down, and I have my square set to the dimension I want. And, you know, I'm just going to use that as a gauge. So as I sand this thing down, I can check it, make sure that I didn't go too far, or see how much I have to take off. So, yeah, we'll get to it. So there we go. You know, got my measurement right where I want it. Really simple way, you know, not really that difficult to do a lot of this stuff. Just take your time and, you know, make sure that you're just checking everything every step of the way. So we'll just keep on, do the next two, and then we'll be done with this. And then we'll move on to the rest of the car. All right, so we're going to be installing a piece of round rod up here. Now I have everything positioned with the camera to try and, you know, show as much as I can. I have a clamp here clamping this panel to this panel to make sure it stays aligned when I install my round rod in here. Now, again, I've made my marks, and I know you can't see them, but I'm up in here in this corner. And for this piece, I'm going to put this one in and try and make it run parallel to this one that's already installed. So I'm using JB Weld epoxy. It's the same that I've been using the entire time. You know, I just tore the cover off to see how much I have left. I have these, you know, I like to use this little mixing tray that comes with it. You know, there is the round rod that I actually am going to be installing. The round rod I actually sanded down and cleaned the same way that I did to all the other panels so that the epoxy will stick. I just didn't think it was a necessary, you know, step to show everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and epoxy this thing in place. I'm going to do my best to get it on camera. So this stuff, I want to mix it really good. It's kind of cold now. It's about 67 degrees. So it's the set time on this says 1 minute. And you really do have about 1.5 minutes in this temperature to work with it. So I like to take my time here, make sure it's mixed really good. You don't want spots that are like, you know, super loaded with the hardener. I mean, make sure you get it thoroughly mixed properly. Then what I'm going to do is take my tool, basically just a spare piece of round rod, and I'm going to smear some of that right up where I want it to be, the round rod to be. And it's just to put something right on that, you know, the base, to make sure that when I put the round rod in place, that there's already, you know, some of this epoxy sitting there. Now it does kind of want to drip on you, so bit of a messy step here. Just going to load the ends with epoxy. It's good to have a rag or paper towel on hand. These short pieces, you know, it's definitely going to get on your fingers. It does come off really easy with alcohol though, so not a big deal. So now I got, the ends good and loaded. And it is a little slippery until it starts to set. All right. So I have that where I want it. Now I'm going to take this little spare piece of round rod, this little tool, grab some of this resin, or sorry, epoxy. Keep saying resin, I'm thinking of fiberglass. So I'm going to smear this around here. Make sure that's, on the fiberglass, on the rod, everywhere I want it to be, so that it has a nice, good hold. You want to work pretty quick. You only have so much time with this stuff to get it to set, or before it sets. Sorry, trying to work and talk. It's like chewing gum and walking. I'm not very good at it. All right, so that one's that. And now we're just going to let it sit. The next piece we're going to be doing is right in here. I'll set up the camera, a little bit differently, try and get that one. I don't want to put this in until this one has a really good, cure, just in case if I'm pushing or pulling on this panel, I don't want to have this separate. So we're just going to let that one sit for a couple of minutes. And then we'll come back, we'll do this. And then the last one will be at the very bottom. Okay, so I was not able to get a good camera angle to install this piece here, but as you can see, I got this one epoxied in, same process that I used up top. Now we are going to do the last piece down here. So got a decent angle this time. I can kind of, show the steps a little bit better. So we're just going to start off with the epoxy. This is the last of this tube. So again, just going to mix this stuff up real good. Now we're just going to take some of this and we're going to smear it right in the corner. And I'm going to do it right down here on the rod. I'm not welding this just because of the foam. If the foam wouldn't be there, then, I could weld the rod and then, epoxy the fiberglass like I have before. But, this is just a little bit different. I'm going to load the ends up really good. And then we're going to stick this one in place. This is going to, take some time to dry here. I'm going to probably be stuck here for a minute. Get a better position. Like I said, you know, this stuff's really kind of slick until it starts to set. So with gravity, it just keeps wanting to fall down. So what I do is you just keep pulling it back into place, the epoxy, and you'll feel it start to kind of, you know, get hard. Once it starts to get tacky, then you're getting close. The idea is you don't want to keep pulling it apart. Um, that can create air bubbles in it and make it weak. So once it starts to really set, you know, and you got it right where you want it, you really want to try and let it alone. But, you know, sometimes like this, you're just going to fight it until it starts to harden up. All right, so after everything, you know, cured really good, this is the final product. You can see we have really good panel alignment right in here. The round rod itself, you can see inside here how those two rods kind of mirror each other. That's for the upper portion, and then the lower portion here. Now let's move on down. You can see in here how we have round rod to round rod going to the fiberglass, and same down here. So there you have it. That's pretty much what it took to get both these sides to match up and be symmetrical. And again, adding a bunch of rigidity, and this cavity right in here will be able to be filled in with a trim panel. So, you know, this little port right here will be wide open for airflow. This will be closed. And then we'll have to decide what we're going to do up in the top area here. But yeah, so there you have it. So that's basically going to wrap it up for this episode. You know, the next step for me is going to be finishing up this back end section here. From there, I'm going to be moving on to adding more foam. So you're going to want to make sure that you are checking back, and you know, I will be putting out content again consistently. So yeah, make sure you check back to see the foam, because I think that's when things are going to start making a lot more sense for people visually. So again, if you have questions, you know, let me know. Comments, I love hearing them. And until then, we'll catch you next time. Thanks.